So media, trust and machines, that's the motto, that's the topic of the Medientage München. And my next guest is an author who had a quite interesting point on the development of social media and development of networks. We just talked about blogs and the original social media when people could comment on anything that someone else has written. And now your thesis is that everything is more centralized. So what happened in your point of view?
Well, we think about the first blogging and what became of that. It was anyone could create media online very simply and easily, and people were using that format to create stuff and to comment on other people's stuff, and people would jump on other people's blogs and comment there. It was highly decentralized. The social media that we know of now, Facebook in particular, but Twitter also, and other things, are much more centralized in terms of users going to them and living inside of their sites as opposed to their own sites. And that's a huge change.
There's so many articles that thought Facebook is the new AOL, a kind of a walled garden system. And there are also, on the other hand, a lot of approaches to decentralize systems like Twitter. Last year, I remember an example like Mastodon, where people could install a kind of a Twitter on their own servers. But all these projects never succeed, were never successful. So why? Why will people always go to these centralized companies?
Well, there are a couple of reasons why people gravitate toward something like Facebook. One is that everyone else is there. That's a powerful advantage that is almost impossible, very difficult to dislodge, because we're going to do the easiest thing. Second is that what they do is very useful and easy to use. There are many issues there. I don't want Facebook taking over the internet. I think that'd be disastrous if that happened. And yet I'm working with them on another project that would hopefully not involve that. So the ease of use, convenience, network effect itself, which is if other people are there, that's where people will go. But don't write off things like Mastodon and other highly decentralized projects that are underway that have, I think, some real potential. And we're still early days of a lot of this, and we're seeing some remarkably interesting technology that's coming along based on blockchain, the idea of a ledger keeping track of stuff that is nowhere and everywhere, that has great potential to perhaps give us some liberty from the centralized networks.
When we talk about the user behavior, and you talked about convenience and everything is easy to use, so we saw that Facebook, that Twitter, that YouTube, they were all the same. It doesn't matter if you're a brand or if you're a person or if you're a cat or whatever, and that made it very, very simple for users to use. And I see that people often have difficulties with decentralized websites, decentralized systems where they have to learn the user interface anytime from scratch. So is that the biggest lever in having successful decentralized systems?
I think it's one of the issues that people have to grapple with, the idea that nobody really likes to learn something new in terms of a tool, but sometimes we find that the newer tool is more useful for us. We're still trying to understand a lot of how this is going to work, but the network effect, you cannot overstate how important that is. When other people are there, it's very difficult to say, no, I'm going to go here and I want you to come over here with me. Whereas with the centralized ones like Twitter or Facebook, Google, and others, it's a gravity well, in a sense, that pulls people in.
So in terms of the market capitalization of social networks, also there's a centralized media volume, media budget in it, and it's even easier for companies to have their advertisement spent there where they can use the same infrastructure on websites, on apps, on social networks, and everything is combined together. So how could a infrastructure work for the media industry that is not centralized?
Well, I wish the media industry had understood what was happening a lot earlier and had done more to declare its own independence. But media people have never cooperated very much in the first place. And by the time they understood what was happening, it was quite late. And I don't want to discount the very useful nature of the networks that exist. They can be very helpful. Having said that, I think it would be great if media companies would get together and talk more and maybe not build their own platform, but think about how they can support ideas, projects that will help re-decentralize the technology we have.
But wouldn't you agree that that it's very important for a successful company to own the platform, to know everything about the users, to own the content, and to build a kind of an algorithm out of that? So maybe it's very important for all these media companies to talk together, to build alliances, to build an own platform.
Well, that's a nice ideal. The one word that you didn't use, which is the key one, is data. And it's the ownership of the data that, in the end, is the most important thing. And as the saying goes, if you're not paying for a service on the internet, you are not the customer, you are the product being sold to others. That's what's going on. I think there's an opportunity for the media industry to do a lot of things, including offer content and value, community, conversation, content, other things, in a way that, first of all, does retain some control in the right kind of way for the media provider, but second, does not turn the user into the product, and that encourages people to pay for what they're using and to really reset that relationship, because ad blockers are not going away. Okay. I use ad blockers, and I will continue to, because I think that the ad tech industry is so obnoxious and is so invasive that media industry should get together and fix that problem. I think that would bring a lot of people back.
Is there one specific recommendation you can give the media industry how they could face ad blockers in terms that they help the user to use the product and don't make the user the product?
Well, this is easy to say and really hard to do. Persuade people that some things are worth paying for. That's what I think would be great. Now, it's not going to work for everyone, and it also, in the environment we've created in the last decade or two, that would start to segregate people who can afford to buy content and usability of things from those who can't afford it. Do we want to leave a lot of people out who don't have as much money? That's a really serious question. But I think that the ad tech business is so just awful in so many ways that it would be great if we could reset that relationship in a way that respects the user of media and that shows that we have something that we can do together. I don't see that happening yet, but I think until that happens, people are going to resort to increasingly tough ways to prevent the centralized powers from controlling them in the way they do.
I think the big companies are not being afraid of the next big one. I think they're more afraid of the next hundreds of small ones. So is it maybe the time to encourage people from the media industry to start something new, to start something innovative, and not just to wait and say, oh no, we cannot compete anymore with Google and Facebook and other networks?
It's never too late to start until it's too late. And we have to keep in mind, for media companies now, they're facing, in many cases, an existential threat which is going out of business. That the business model has crumbled, the one that we used to have in the days of a few newspapers or a couple in any community and a few broadcasting outlets, and now this, but that's now reconverging on a couple of huge companies that are having a lot of control and power. In that environment, a lot of media people are focused on one thing only, which is survival. So it's hard for them to say, okay, I'm going to go now innovate while I'm trying to survive. Nonetheless, I think that's incredibly important, but they can't stop using the social networks instantly. They have to try and navigate their way through this transition.
Yeah, everything is changing right now. So the distribution model is changing, the business model is changing, the storytelling is changing, so everything is changing. So they have to fight on 3 different levels, right?
Only 3?
Maybe more. Okay, I think we could discuss this for hours, but we're running out of time here. So thanks, Dan Gillmor, for being my guest here at the Medientage. And feel free to discuss this with Dan on social media or maybe somewhere else on your blog, so decentralized. And thanks for being my guest.
Thank you.